Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Tobler, and I'm the head of coaching here at Meru Health. I'm also a licensed marriage family therapist and emotional intelligence certified coach. For those of you who are joining in from outside of our team, Meru Health is an online mental health care provider that uses a mind body approach to help people with depression, anxiety, and burnout. Meru Talk is an educational forum where we bring in researchers and other experts from different fields to talk about their specialty. Today, we have the privilege to have Dr. Philippe Goldin on the topic of using emotional intelligence skills for a better life. Dr. Philippe Goldin is a professor at UC Davis and leads the clinically applied affective neuroscience laboratory. Dr. Goldin's team is doing extensive research on cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and compassion cultivation training. Dr. Goldin also helped develop the famous Search Inside of Yourself program at Google and also the Search Inside of Yourself Leadership Institute, which delivers mindfulness-based emotional intelligence and leadership skills training program worldwide. We'll also get a chance to look at this famous course today. Dr. Goldin, welcome.
Thank you. Greetings.
Um, let's see. I have a few practicalities. We will have a live Q&A session in the end, so please post your questions into the Q&A box in the bottom. You can also post questions there at any time during the session when something comes up, and we will answer them at the Q&A time. All right, let's dive in. Dr. Goldin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you today and just enlighten us on Search Inside of Yourself course and also emotional intelligence and connection with our work in mental health.
So what I thought to do to start with, of course, this is a huge topic, but we'll just take little pieces at a time. So I'm going to just share a couple of slides and a little bit of information to provide a context or a background that hopefully will generate questions and discussion. So let's just dive in. And again, this is just a little piece. So the Search Inside Yourself program, just to be clear, it's actually a kind of a little joke, insider joke, because at Google, basically there was a group of people who came together to create something for the Googlers, which is what they call themselves, to help raise the common denominator of well-being, emotional balance, resilience, insight. So instead of searching outside, right, or the search engine, which is what makes the bread and butter at Google, this is a kind of a joke. It's search inside yourself as opposed to outside. So this is a program that initially was 7 weeks long, 20 something hours, then 2 days long, 16 hours. So there are many variations, and we've done research on this, but just as a motivation, just to make it very clear and very simple, we are living in a time of incredible angst, emotional distress, climate dread and fear. And the question is, how do we get from this state of angst and depression, anxiety, burnout, suffering, whatever words you want to use, to a mind, a mental state that is light, elucidated, clear, vivid, creative? And of course, we all can relate to this being fused with your machines, with our devices, and kind of the stress, frustration that we feel with that. But what does it mean to perform optimally? So not just to get rid of depression, anxiety, and stress, as if that was even possible, because that's part of the human condition, but what does it mean to raise the level of wellness and ability to function skillfully? What gets in the way? So here's just a small sample of data, and this is the only data I'm going to show today. We have lots of other data from 80 Googlers. People who scored, self-identified as scoring very high on stress, perceived stress, right? So they were perceived stress. They also, the higher the level of stress, decreased ability to regulate your emotions, mindfulness skills, less social support, lower self-esteem, lower satisfaction with life, lower emotion intelligence. These are all self-reported questionnaires, right? Lower self-compassion, lower empathy. So we could just stop there for a moment. The more stress that I perceive in myself, all of these other very important basic life skills, capacities are decreased. Furthermore, there's increased rumination or spinning on negative thoughts, on critical self-beliefs, which is a key driver of major depression. It also has been shown through research to maintain depression. And after you come out of depression, the higher the rumination, the higher the likelihood that I will fall back into another episode of depression. So increased rumination, worry, social anxiety, and loneliness. So this is just to plant the reality of the field that we're trying to look at, the complexity. But there's hope. There is hope. And here, this is it. What does it mean to become a fully mature, skillful, adaptive human being? So this is Luke Skywalker from Star Wars and his teacher, his master, Yoda. And at Google, we used to laugh about this, that we were all Padawans searching for a Yoda. The idea that we actually need to study with people who are masters and who can help us cultivate important qualities, like I just mentioned before, to really be able to deal with the negativity, to be skillful, and then to be really maximally, optimally helpful to others. So in the Search Inside Yourself program, very simply put, these are the four domains that we look at: mindfulness meditation, actual meditation skills, mindfulness and compassion, it really should say, skills, developing some of the skills that load onto emotional intelligence, leadership skills and models of leadership, and then the science, be it clinical and neuroscience data that helps to understand how leadership works, emotional intelligence works, and mindfulness. Getting just a little bit more specific, when we talk about emotional intelligence and mindfulness, there are 5 simple domains, each of which enhancing self-awareness is number 1. Developing self-awareness, the ability to self-regulate, enhancing the clarity of one's motivation and one's values, and then empathic response to the suffering and pain in others, and then leadership skills as a way to then act in the world. So these are 5 domains. Why? Why should we care about this? So this is very important, and I think you already know this. I'm just highlighting what we already know. It's a VUCA world. What is VUCA? Life is volatile. Things are changing and exploding and all the time. It's a volatile ecosystem that we live in. Life is uncertain. No matter how much we plan or try to control our life from day to day, week to week, uncertainty is really more the basic principle than certainty, even though we strive for that. So uncertainty is also really hard to bear, to be totally honest. Mm-hmm. Life is complex. In fact, it's getting more complex as society evolves in different ways. And that complexity by itself is really challenging to hold on to and to make sense of. Then life is ambiguous. There's so many factors that are constantly in flux and changing. To be able to sit in not knowing is by itself, that's a major skill, I would say. So ambiguity can drive some people really nuts. And then this is something that we really need to know how to sit with. So from a book, What Matters Now, Gary Hamel made this very simple quote: "The world is becoming more turbulent and complex, faster than most organizations are becoming more resilient." Complexity and turbulence goes up, and our ability to be resilient is not increasing at the same speed. Mm-hmm. Do the very simple math, that delta, that difference, induces a lot of distress. Yes. Then, even if I am completely skillful and mature, just being a human being in this kind of a body that decays, mental faculties that are challenged, just being human is tough. We know that, even in the best of circumstances. So what can we do? Can we do? Well, emotional intelligence is actually a term that was used decades ago and really developed by Peter Salovey and Mayer, two professors at Yale University. Peter Salovey later on moved to become president of Yale University. But they're the ones who really put this concept on the map. And here's how they define it. And I divide it into three components, but they're words. The ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions. If we stop just there, this is a highly developed skill. If I can do just that, this kind of level of awareness of self and others, that's huge. Two, then the ability to discern or to discriminate among them. What are the different emotions? What's mine? What's others?
Yep.
Three, then so what? We use this information from our own feelings, emotions, patterns of behaviors that we see in ourselves and others as information to guide one's own thinking and actions. And this is the actual implementation. Step 1 and 2 is gathering the information, the insight, the content. Step 3 is then implementing it so that at least we can reduce the amount that we harm others and harm ourselves. And then ideally, that we become skillful navigators of life so that we can be of benefit to ourselves and to others. This is the map. And of course, there's lots of little details. How do you actually do this?
Exactly.
Well, Daniel Goleman, friend of mine, he's written a whole series of books, but this is one that really put emotional intelligence in the public eye because he took tons of research that scientists had done and he put it together in a nice little package and helped explain it, elucidate it for the benefit of the 5 categories that I mentioned: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills. So we teach each of those normally in Search Inside Yourself over many hours, over a month and a half. And then you actually practice it. But these are all interrelated. The other person that really needs credit here is Howard Gardner, who died a couple of years ago. He was a professor of psychology at Harvard. And the idea of multiple intelligences, not just one, not just cognitive intelligence, but that there are many different modes of intelligence, physical, mental, sensory, was a framework for helping develop these ideas of emotional intelligence. But simply, there's intrapersonal, how I work with my own mind. I like to call this is the inner research laboratory. My thoughts, my ideas, my images, my memory, my stories, intrapersonal skills, and then interpersonal skills, how I interact with others, how I learn from others, how I facilitate or scaffold well-being in others and in myself. So these are 2 different domains and they're very importantly linked. The self-awareness, knowing one's own internal states, your preferences, your biases, your intuitions. Self-regulation, the ability to manage or emotionally regulate one's own internal states, impulses, emotions. And then third, my motivation, understanding my tendencies, my values, how I facilitate reaching my goals. These are all intrapersonal forms of intelligence or skills. Interpersonally, there's empathy. There's a lot to say about empathy, but simply put, and there are different forms of empathy, but awareness of other people's emotions, beliefs, concerns, values, and building a model of that, and then relating to others in a way that with empathic resonance, if you want to use that word. And there's a whole brain circuits that have evolved in human animals to be able to experience empathy and to act on empathy with others. And then social skills, how to be adept, how to adjust, malleability when working with others. Those are a little bit about interpersonal. There's much more to say about that. So what? Why do we even bother? Well, there's many reasons for this, but I'm simply going to point out one thing. These are different skills that are thought to be important for tech workers or tech workers, right? Achievement, drive, influence, initiative. Turns out the ones in green load on emotional intelligence.
That's right.
The two in gray are the traditional or older model of just cognitive, conceptual thinking, analytic ability. Super important. Turns out, as information has become more important in society and workplaces, the emotional skills, interpersonal skills, resonating and working skillfully with others has become more and more and more and more important. So there's a lot more to say, but just to end here is simply to say that our society now really needs people who are much more emotionally harmonized, in harmony with others, attuned with others, to be able to work in groups that then develop organizations that then touch ecosystems and then hopefully enhances world peace and stability. This is what we need. And these all come back to these basic building blocks that are part of emotional intelligence. So I'm going to pause there because we have a lot. We have some time to think together about what's important.
Very true.
What's important?
So, so well said, Dr. Goldin. And I love what you said about the VUCA world. And I think one is technology actually make the complexity, the speed of change faster and faster, right? And nowadays, even talk about artificial intelligence. There's sayings that in an AI-driven world, we especially need more EI because it's more things to process, more difficult to understand what's really going on because so many things we can't see what's behind the scene, and less a sense of control, right? Human beings don't have control. Machines have control now more so than before ever. And that sense of uncertainty. And how do we manage our own responses and reactions to that to be able to be successful in the AI world? It's so critical. Yeah. And of course, with the pandemic, this has been incredibly highlighted that these sets of skills are not reserved for world leaders, company leaders. It's really for every single human being, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, there are many things that we're learning from this time of the COVID, but one thing is loneliness, right? If you want to say if you think about all the mental imbalances, psychological disorders, loneliness is probably number one.
Yeah.
Even people who live with others often can experience a lot of loneliness. So it's not just physically alone. And this goes back to these basic skills that load on emotional intelligence, which is what does it mean to be emotionally in harmony, curious, attuned with others? And we are social beings. I mean, our brains are designed for social interactions and emotional resonance and love. And the extent to which that we deny ourselves all of that, we are really lonely. And that's a sad way to go through life.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, during this social isolation or social distancing time, the isolation has become highlighted how much we need to connect with each other emotionally, right? Even if physically we can't. How do we find this, ability to connect with technology's help? But on the other hand, I also think it highlighted an interesting phenomenon where our lives used to be so busy. We are able to find some kind of distraction constantly as long as we're on this giant machine, it's moving forward, everything business as usual. But suddenly when you put a stop, who we have to be with the most? We have to be with ourselves. Exactly.
So this inner, I call it the inner research lab, right?
Mhm.
Where do we really practice inner transformation? In this research lab. It doesn't cost a penny. You don't need a grant. You don't need money. So this is really the body, the mind, heart, brain.
Yeah.
Uh, we have a constant flow of information of how am I doing? How am I breathing? My heart rate, my skin conductance, the feelings in my neck. All of this is a continuous flow of information that allows us to check in if we develop self-awareness.
Yeah. So
And yeah,
so well said. I wanted to relate that to what we have seen, the heightened mental health concerns out of, as a side effect, sort of people call it a hidden pandemic out of the
mhm,
pandemic, where when we have to spend so much time with ourselves, we found many, many people who are very capable, functional, starting to really struggle with that sense of how do I be with myself? How do I be? How do I be well, right?
mhm.
So, what what do you see as ways how emotional intelligence, and I love how you said it, that it's a set of skills, unlike IQ where you were assigned a number and it was based on sort of like your birth,
115.
right? Exactly. So, can you speak more about how EQ
Yeah,
is unlike IQ that we
yeah.
can develop?
I think um, there are a number of some of the simple things that I can say here is, uh, can we laugh? Can we laugh at ourselves? Can we bring a sense of humor? Can we bring a sense of appreciation for who we are? So if we talk about radical acceptance, not just acceptance, but radical acceptance of like, this is who I am. Here are my strengths, my weaknesses, the things I like about myself, the things I don't like about myself. And can we bring a sense of playfulness? In Sanskrit, they have a wonderful term for this, lila, which is a deep, deep word, but this playful creativity with the self and with our environment. So I, like many others, also spend a lot more time out in nature. And one of the things about nature is that it's constantly changing, it's organic, it's shifting with the seasons, with light, with wind, hearing the sounds. And it's a way of also tuning with what is around me. And that I think is an external mirror of also tuning with what's happening inside of me. And so I think this kind of this curiosity, playfulness, and sense of humor.
Mhm. So important how we have to feel well and think well of ourselves, going back to the psychological concept of ourself, right? And you've mentioned it, how important that is as a bedrock and foundation of having mental health and not
Yes.
health issues.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to really settle in on two core underlying psychological mechanisms that either lead to health or lead to mental disorders, psychological problems, whatever you want to call it, how we view ourselves in a healthy way, in adaptive ways or maladaptive ways, and then how we relate to that self. And I'm actually visualizing the brain circuits that do this work. But how we relate to our sense of self, our views of ourself, and
Mhm.
then emotion regulation skills. There's a whole set of skills: acceptance, cognitive reappraisal, are a couple examples. These are the two core mechanisms that can either be awry and lead to depression, anxiety, suicidality, eating disorders, or they can be healthy and help us feel confident,
Yep.
playful um, in the world.
Powerful. Yeah. So important and such good news that is something that it's not set since your birth, but it's things you can learn. So, Dr. Golden, can you talk about how can we identify and develop some of these skills? Where do we begin? If I heard about the EI the first time, and especially during this pandemic, some people say, "Wow, I realize I had no resilience. How do I?" It just
Mm,
feels like I don't even know I'm hitting the ground.
yes.
Where would
So
some?
there are many ways to develop. Uh, familiarity or intimacy. So I like the words familiarity, intimacy, malleability, but there are many ways. So for example, you could take a course that has to do with emotional resilience. You could work with a coach or a therapist or a counselor and begin to explore some of these capacities. Remember, emotional intelligence is many different skills. The other way is, and this is actually very good for helping to understand the terrain. You could read this book by Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence, which is a very nice roadmap. But then to go deeper, if you're curious, to go deeper and deeper, you can do this on your own. You can also do it with a partner or with family members, which is also really interesting, especially if they're equally motivated. And then if you want to go even deeper, I would, at Google at least, we really focused on meditation skills, different kinds of meditations, be they mindfulness, compassion, concentration, and there are many other deeper meditation skills. As a tool, meditation is just a technique or set of techniques or tools to actually look inside, right? Search inside yourself, to begin to explore, how do I function? What are the triggers? What are my patterns of reactivity? And how do I build up like the strength, the muscle, the flexibility and the strength to be with other people and with myself? So there's a whole slew or a whole developmental trajectory of different tools that we can use to do that inner exploration or inner transformation. Some of them are in Western psychotherapy. Many of them are now what we call third wave psychotherapies that include a lot of Eastern tools of meditation and other kinds of practices to enhance awareness. But self-awareness, self-regulation, and then motivation, right? The intrapersonal skills are all skills that can be developed, slowing down, noticing. But ideally, going back to the idea of Luke Skywalker and Yoda, it really helps if you have at least one or mentors or wise people in your life who you can turn to and check in with and make sure that you're on the path and to clarify any ambiguities or doubts. I think it's really important to have elders, mentors,
Coaches.
coaches.
Yeah. No, Dr. Goldin is very well said. I mean, I work a lot with engineers, and when we talk about emotional regulation or even just the word emotions, how many times engineers will give me the, blank stare, like, that's another language. And, I speak math. I don't speak that. Emotions. Who needs that, right? That's like the woman or whoever speaks. It's a little stereotype, but there is a lot of questions, like you said, about having motivation to develop these skills. Is it really necessary for everyone, or is it really just for those who are struggling emotionally?
The simple answer is that yes, if I value becoming a mature, fully developed human being, and if I value not harming others, then developing these different emotional intelligence skills is fundamental. So I used to really enjoy at Google working with people who were completely skeptical, scientists, computer scientists, engineers. And then we would propose it. We'd say, collect your own first person data. Don't trust me. Collect your own data. So inevitably we had people try out different things about, like, for example, what does it mean to actually listen to your partners, parents, friends, children?
Yep.
How do you listen now? And what do you actually attend to? And then what are you missing? What's it like to actually ask your partner, did I understand you right? Did I hear you? So one simple exercise that I love doing, we would do with dyads, two people, listening for content, what the other person said, and then feeding that back. Did I hear you correctly? Did I understand what you said? Then you do it again. This time you're not listening for content. You're listening for the emotional tones that the person is actually emoting, showing, sharing. Not the content, but the emotional tones. So then you feed back, this is what I heard you feel. not what you said. And then you check, did I get that right? This one exercise is mind rocking. Let's
That's
call it that.
right.
For some
Absolutely.
people, it's like, oh my gosh, I never listened for what the other person was feeling, right? This is a basic building block for empathy and for social skills. So a lot of people, they say, well, just try this. Go and try this yourself. Come back next week and then tell me what you observed. As a good scientist, take notes, collect data, and then come back.
Yeah.
So there are many, many exercises like this. That's just one. But if I had to pick one thing, an attitude, an open attitude towards active listening or empathic listening to others who you care about.
Yeah.
Even the hardest skeptical person has people who they care about. It might even be their pet. How do I listen to my cat?
That's right.
Do I actually pay attention to my cat? Well,
Yeah.
that's an act of empathy.
Yeah.
So you've already got these skills. Now, what does it mean to refine those skills, attune those skills, and to notice what happens in all the people that you interact with when you are more selfless, more present, more aware,
Yeah.
less distracted? Just notice. Don't assume, just notice. Collect your own data and then come back. Inevitably, these people will be like, oh my gosh, I never listened to my wife like that. Oh my gosh, my kid is now suddenly sharing things that she never said before. Oh,
It's
great. That's really cool. How far does this go? I don't know. Check it out. Check it out. You do the work, not me.
exactly.
So it's fun. It's really good to work with people who are skeptical because they're the ones, especially if they're empirically oriented, collect your own data.
Yeah. I love that.
Figure out what data you need to understand how this works.
Yes. Yes. I worked for years as a couples therapist, and that's one of the key exercises I do for couples when they're in trouble. The sad thing is, by the time they come to see a therapist, they're often at a stage. Exactly, right? If you only could catch them before they get to this crisis, and the question of whether we go on or not, and that pressure to just learn, this is a simple skill. It's like now you can speak Italian. When you go to Italy, you can actually understand what everybody is saying, and you gather all of this information that's rich around you that existed all the time. Yeah.
You're
So,
bringing up a good point, which is not only couples, but in elementary schools and middle schools, they are beginning to integrate what's called social emotional learning,
yeah.
right? And now it's even social emotional environmental learning, SEEL. That's the next extension.
Okay.
But it raises the question, if you put it as a question, what are the basic skills of interpersonal skills and intrapersonal skills that we would love the next generation to have, so that by the time they're 35 and they're feeling distress about their partners or their job, then they come to a coach expecting the coach to save them. No. These are skills we need to integrate into our educational system from the get-go.
Yeah. So good. One of the questions people are asking is, should they be taught earlier in life? And I think you're saying yes. Why should we wait until crisis happens when you can establish and develop these skills early on, right?
Yeah, I mean, just think about how many bullies or unskillful leaders or managers we have at work. I
Yep.
mean, where's the greatest suffering?
Yeah.
In your relationships, in our relationships, if we have a partner,
Yeah.
and with kids, I have two daughters, so it's tough. And then at work.
Yep.
And where do we experience bullying and difficult people first? Usually at school,
Ooh.
in elementary school, middle school. What is social justice? What are some social skills and ways of dealing with victims, bullies, difficult people to learn when I'm 9, 10,
Yeah. Exactly.
11? Why wait till I'm 25 or 30 or 40,
Yeah. And
right?
a lot of times we say hurt people hurt people. If the people who, are bullying a lot of time themselves learn these emotional regulation skills, being able to understand their own needs, they a lot of time don't turn into a bully, right? They will actually have the skills to know how to address and get healing. So such a important concepts that I think we both agree, and many in the audience are agreeing, should be taught earlier and sooner the better, as well as really another question is, developing these skills, have they been linked to mental health prevention, right?
Mm.
If people who can develop these emotional intelligence skills early on could then prevent mental health pandemic that's going on right now, and also workplace depression, anxiety, burnouts, could there
Yeah.
be better prevention if people have more EI skills?
Yes, I mean, depression, sad mood, anxiety, fear, worry, phobias, that's normal. And even stress is normal. These are all normal parts of being human. But the question is there a threshold that then I pass where it really disrupts my ability to be well, to function? And if learning different emotion regulation skills, resilience, communication skills helps a person, experience depression, anxiety, stress, but not be overwhelmed, not be completely dysregulated, that's a way of helping to prevent the intensity of mental health problems that we're seeing now. Now, that's one part, right? Now, that's the intrapersonal. The other thing is that's really important, you have to be honest here, is that what's the environment that I live in? And the other people that I'm with, and do we have a common language and understanding? And then there's another level, which again is very important. Do organizations, be it a school, Google, a workplace, a federal government job, do they have a structure and a set of values and qualities that are about enhancing the whole person, right? Not just you do this work and then you get $150,000. That's an old model that we have to step out of. And just to give you the context, right? Universities in the older, long centuries ago, people didn't go to school. And then monasteries, religious institutions, people went there and they studied. And then religious education got separated from public education. Now the question is, now we have organizations like Google, workplaces that teach all kinds of stuff. So even now, if you think about lifelong learning, can that happen? Should it happen? How should it happen in the workplace? That you bring people into your company, your workplace, and they're going to continue to learn and evolve and mature into fully developed beings. Education doesn't stop at college, master, PhD, MD. It should continue the whole life. And that's actually, from just a neuroscience perspective, that's the way our brains have evolved, is to continuously learn.
Yes, yes. And as human beings, we continually develop physically and intellectually as well. So why not? Why not emotionally, right? Why does the emotional language has to stop, or the understanding, the skills has to not be? So this is one of the visions we have for our EI coaching program, is to really open up the opportunity for every single employee, not just only leaders who are really, really needing the skills, but every single employee to continually develop these sets of skills for themselves, right? Yeah. So I will open up some of the Q&A questions that are coming in. So shall we dive in and answer some of
Go
them?
for it.
All right. So one question said, um, what happens when you fail to uphold your EI and your resilience fails? How do you compassionately move on from that? How do you,
Self-kindness
yeah, how
is
can you
so
fail EI?
fundamental. I am going to fall down. You know how many mistakes I've made? How many times I've screwed up? I've made mistakes, things I regret, times that I've, right? And I think there's part of, again, going back to this playfulness, self-kindness, kindness, and flexibility, and kind of a radical acceptance. There is no human, there's no, like I tell my family, my kids, we don't use the word perfect. We remove that word. There is no such thing. We all fail, and then we all move, and we continue to evolve and to hopefully learn something from that. So resilience and all of these things that we're talking about are organic trajectories,
Yes.
shifting and changing. Think about a sine wave moving up and down,
Yep.
and these are all in flux. In fact, that's part of the uncertainty and ambiguity, is that all of these abilities even my muscles and strength and flexibility and tendons, let those change from day to day, depending on what I do.
Exactly.
But then the other flip side of this is, do I carve out time, or do I skillfully integrate into my daily routine time to be with myself, to attune, to notice the irritabilities and go, oh, those are thoughts, those are patterns, but that's not me. Those are neurons just burping and doing all the things that they do. That's normal, but that's not me. But then that raises the question, what am I in addition to all of my thoughts, emotions, behaviors? There's something else beyond that. And if I only get stuck on thoughts or negativity or irritability or monkey mind, then I get stuck. But can I shift? And what
I
does
like
it mean to shift? And what does that look like in each of us? That is a sign of maturity
yeah.
and flexibility.
And in fact, it's like, you ask a baby who is learning to walk, when they trip over and fall, do they fail walking? No, they just get up and keep walking, right? So EI training, EI skill development, it's really just, have compassion. This is part of the normal journey of life, and keep moving. And as you said, that shift, going back at that very moment of the failure, if there could be a failing point, you just do the shift and focusing on internal and start practicing, and you move on, right?
Imagine if not only in families, but also every workplace, say you start working somewhere, and what they say is, guess what? I'm going to fail. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to screw up plenty of times. And I'm just putting that out there from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it, you'll do it. And then the question is, can we move beyond, learn, and continue beyond that? Because I don't expect you to be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. But can we have a common structure, idea, sensibility, or mindset to just be, to call it what it is, and then to go, look, as long as we have a language and a trust to be able to communicate, and then maybe we can even laugh about it and then move on.
And figure out a solution, better solution, even together, right? So imagine this kind of environment exists in every workplace. I think half of the burnout will be gone. Yeah. Another question came up.
Yeah.
Are there any aspects of EI that cannot be learned or practiced in that they're not malleable?
I mean, if you think about, how do I listen to others? How do I listen to myself? How do I develop more mindfulness skills, awareness, depth? No, I think these are all malleable. It's like saying, are there any capacities, human capacities or cognitive abilities that we all know sit in brain circuits? Are any of those fixed? The answer is no. Nope. The brain,
Neuroplasticity.
every single thing that I choose to do or not do every day is actually sculpting brain anatomy, physical structure, and also function or functional connectivity across brain nodes. So we are organic beings from the get-go. And the question is how we skillfully or not skillfully actually sculpt our brain, our psychology, our behavior.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. Thank you, Doctor. Um, Another question came up relating to people who may be struggling in deep depression and
Mm.
are taking antidepressants, for example. One of the
Yeah.
questions is, do you advocate? And I think maybe this is not necessarily directly related to the EI concept and
Mhm.
search inside yourself, but do you advocate for things like antidepressant? How can someone in deep darkness, maybe in depression, develop EI without medication?
Yeah, there are times when medications, and there are many different kinds of medications, both produced by the pharma industry, and as well as natural substances,
Yeah,
that can be beneficial. When, if I'm deeply stuck, right? If I break my arm, I need a splinter
yeah,
or a cast.
yeah,
And that just provides enough structure to then allow the bones to grow, reset, to grow. When I then can take the cast off and then begin physical therapy.
That's right.
Likewise, if a person is in a deep, deep depression, I can't even listen to a therapist or a coach. I can't even get out and do physical exercise or be in nature in the forest across the street. I need something else to help me bring up just enough that then hopefully I can shift. So there's nothing wrong with medications. The question is then how do I know when I'm well enough to then begin to use my own inner muscles of learning how to be kind, to appreciate nature, to savor things that are beautiful. Yeah.
Very well said, because this is an integrated work. EI is a component of all these other ways of healing that can be beneficial.
Yes.
Even when I worked with trauma patients and in the past, there are times when they do meditation, it triggers their anxiety, and so
Yeah.
you actually have to work through some of the trauma responses first and help them get to a place where they can't sit with themselves. And
and meditation, remember, there's a lot, that's a whole other discussion. I mean, there's a whole cognitive developmental trajectory of different kinds of meditation. But meditation is not for everybody. That's one set of tools. There are many other tools as well. And there are many different kinds of practices. And not all practices exist in the West. I spent 6 years in India and Nepal. There are many other tools that have not made it here yet. And that's very important. Actually, for some people, meditation or even psychotherapy is not the right thing to do right now. So the wisdom to know. This is why we really need trusted mentors, coaches that we can turn to when we need other support in making decisions. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very well said. Yeah. Another question from our research scientist. Thank you so much for your presentation and insights, Dr. Goldin. With EI being a multidimensional construct, how can we best measure EI? And in clinical intervention contexts, where long EI instruments may not be feasible, because we know, ESCI is very long and so on. Are there short scales or more timely strategies that can be implemented and still validly capture EI and a growth in EI?
This is a very good question. This goes to measurement, which is at the heart of all research, right? So there are many different kinds of EI self-report measures or interview. And yeah, you're right. Some of them are so long and hard to deal with. And self-report by itself, that just self-report questionnaires have their own problems or in measurement and biases. And did you just have a cup of coffee before you filled it out? Or did you, et cetera, or did you sleep well or not? There's tons of empirical research. And so that's why I hardly ever do research with only self-report questionnaires, because I do EEG, fMRI, heart rate, skin conductance, et cetera, et cetera. Having said that, I would actually focus in on specific skills, right? So there are some very short emotion regulation questionnaires. That's one. There's also a wonderful tool that I like, which is the Attitudes of Active Listening scale, developed by a team in Japan that's been used really elegantly in workplaces in Japan. That's a very good tool, Attitudes of Active Listening. And then there are some scales about the AAQ. This is a acceptance and action questionnaire that comes from ACT therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. And they have some short versions that really get at psychological flexibility, which is the opposite of rigidity. That psychological flexibility is related to emotion regulation and resilience. So I would not EI, but I would dig down into which specific aspects might be most important to measure and to look at change over time. So if for emotion regulation, just to give you something based on lots of research, not the frequency of how many times I use tools to regulate my emotion, but emotion regulation self-efficacy. My belief in my ability to implement some type of emotion regulation skill, maybe there's 7 or 8 different ones, when I need to. Research has been showing that self-efficacy, this metacognitive belief in my ability to do regulation when I need it, maybe even more important than frequency. And that's, so there's a whole, and but to measure metacognitive, I have many friends who are working on scales like that, but it's very hard.
Yeah.
But I think that we can develop, and actually through different meditation practices, you can really enhance metacognitive abilities, this ability to like hover and be aware of, oh, look at how my mind is creating this narrative, this soap opera model, this belief, or this grasping. These are metacognitive skills that help us observe in a much more refined way the nitty gritty of what the mind is doing. That goes back to self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yes, foundation of EI. So it's fascinating to hear all of these current development in the world of EI and also using different levels of skills to really be able to get underneath the self-reporting, right? So we have learned from Dr. Richard Davidson as well, some research he's doing in that sense of well-being and then connecting deeper those different kind of research. So love to hear more maybe in the next talk. Another interesting question has to do with once you're aware of your inner blocks and have had these aha moments, it can be challenging to get them to stick. Even when we know what is best for us, we can forget these aha moments and fall back into what we know, right?
Yep.
What could be 1 to 2 actions we could take to break through those crossroad checkpoints where we recognize ourselves at a standstill?
You know, if we really slow down, and actually there's research on this, that if you think about core negative self schema, core negative self beliefs, there's kind of a set of like 20-ish core negative self beliefs, like I'm not smart enough, I'm not cool enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not, you know, you fill in the dots. That are, there's a core set. And if we really go past the initial thoughts or reactivity, if you dig down, there's really even a smaller set of core negative thoughts that probably drive most of our negative thinking, behavior, interpretation. The one thing is to notice those. Then noticing is one part. And then the second possible action is to then bring in a sense of humor and playfulness, right? So if there's an image that's helpful, right? It could be an image of a fly that, you know, getting its feet stuck and then letting go. It could be, you know, maybe something more joyous or powerful, like a dolphin just leaping out of the ocean and into the air. So find something that's meaningful, that resonates for you, but to make daily habits. So I'll share one thing I do. To remember interconnectedness. Every morning, I grind the beans, I make the coffee, I pour it in a cup, and then I pause. And then in my mind, I imagine beautiful hills in Costa Rica or Venezuela, and I imagine these beans in the bushes and the people who pick the beans and then put them into carts and then put them into trucks and then bring them on a boat or a plane to wherever I happen to be living, whether it's San Francisco or Sweden or wherever. And then they're brought into a place and then they're roasted and then they're packaged and then they're sold to me. And you can go into great detail. And you realize this cup of coffee is actually intimately interconnected to so many systems in the world and people and places. And it arrives as one little cup of coffee in my hand. And that helps. I literally do that. And I have images and I do that every morning as a way of developing humility, appreciation for interconnectedness. And I'm not in this alone. Even if I appear separate from every single other person, that is a visual fallacy, a hallucination that doesn't match the reality.
Yeah.
Everything I eat, smell, taste, wear, my coffee, all interconnected.
So beautiful. So beautiful said. Thank you. And these aha moments essentially are just moments you keep on practicing and they'll
Mhm.
show up again and again. As you said, it's a daily practice. It becomes a habit, and then the new habit is stronger than the old habit. So the aha moment becomes, you know, the way of thinking, and it becomes a default as we continue to practice, right? So,
Yeah, and play with it. I mean, like even just one small example, because I have to stop. Even when I have physical pain or emotional pain, this is something I do this is called a cognitive reappraisal in psychology language or
yeah,
parlance. Is I think when I have a physical pain in my neck or I'm stressed and I think or my back, and I go, may I willingly experience this pain so that someone else doesn't have to. I willingly accept feeling this right now so that you don't have to. And inevitably, that shift in meaning making, changes my whole relationship to the angst or the pain of the moment.
wow, wow,
And the pain might still be there, but now I've imbued it with a different meaning. So this is what I mean by playing with the mind,
yeah,
that we can do this in any moment, even if it's insomnia. Okay, I can't sleep, my mind is racing. Okay, I accept this and I will take this on so that someone else can sleep right now
mm,
and rest.
yeah. So the self-compassion applied to compassion for the humankind, and the interconnectedness is with us all the time. So beautifully said.
Yeah.
I think, thank you so much. We ran out of time. There's a very important question about, uh, helping people with anti-racism, and
Yes.
how do we become aware that, we're aware that other people don't have the awareness they need and so on. But I think it's a deeper question. Maybe we can, I don't know if you have a 30-second answer to that, but maybe
Well,
we can talk more next time.
that's a very large topic, but the very essence is this goes back to again this visual, the brainwashing of our cultures,
Mm-hmm,
the illusion of external appearance
mm-hmm.
that we get caught in. And there's a whole set of practices, and I do have some of these recorded and other ones that I'm working on. This would take a whole workshop by itself, but there's a practice called Just Like Me.
Yes.
Um, and combined with loving kindness, where normally I do it in dyads and I do it multiple times in variations thereof,
Yeah.
um, which really gets beyond what you see here, beyond the immediate interpretation. What is behind and inside fundamentally? And if I do I relate to the external, the superficial, or do I relate to the inner? Do I relate to this moment? Do I relate to the historical process that created Philippe that appears in front of you? Um, so again, this has to do with playing and shifting and uh, exploring what am I actually relating to. That requires again long practice that can help to remove some of the energies that cause us to be racist, biased, inconsiderate, lacking common humanity. These are also malleable. They're
Yes.
malleable.
Yeah. Perhaps for us, it's just starting with ourselves, develop this compassion for people who may or may not have that self-awareness, and then even having, being able to influence them to be curious enough about their own way of looking at things and also their way of interpreting the world, right?
Mhm.
That just like me starts with myself, but then eventually, hopefully, practiced by everyone, right? People who don't understand and uh, not aware of their own sense of biases will begin to see, and it goes back to developing self-awareness
Self-awareness.
and social awareness.
So yeah, social skills, self-awareness, and also just knowing if it is true that every single cell in my body is interconnected to others, physically, food, energy, birth, genetics, etc., then I am part of everybody and everyone else is part of me. Then why would I harm others if part of me is embedded in you?
Yeah. So
But you have to remember that and then practice it.
So, thank you so much. We will end on this beautiful note that we're interconnected, and this no illusion of we exist isolated and alone. And so appreciate your time and your, yeah, everything that you bring to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dr.
Great. Feel
Philippe.
well. Meet again.
All right. Hopefully meet again.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.